Some people have wondered whether the great ship of Western culture is sinking. Personally, I believe it is sinking, overweighted with too much technology and buffeted by stormy seas and winds from the third world. What relationship does the workshop have to this uncertain future? I think it has a lot of relationship. I think individuals in the workshop are preparing themselves for life, for survival in this future uncertain world. They're preparing themselves by becoming more clear inside themselves as to who they are and what their inner strengths and capacities are. They're preparing themselves by learning to live cooperatively, not competitively, not power-seeking. They're really getting ready to survive. They're preparing themselves. They're preparing themselves to face each uncertain moment. That happens in the workshop. It's going to happen as they leave the workshop. It's a good preparation for life in a world where no one knows what's going to happen. So I think that the workshop itself is preparation for living in the future world of which we know so little. I want to speak of a few of the things that I observed personally. I arrived in the middle of the workshop. The very first evening I met with the staff of facilitators. I knew some of them. They greeted me very warmly. They were delighted I was here. It was an extremely warm welcome. And then one woman spoke up saying, "I don't know you. I don't know whether I'll like you or not. You're a stranger to me. I don't feel anything against you, but I don't know you as yet. I welcome the chance to get acquainted with you." Well, that sort of honesty was the kind of thing that really made a great impression on me. She had gone inside herself to look at her own feelings. She realized she didn't feel a very warm welcome because she didn't know me, and she had been open enough to express it. Now, this is the kind of thing that permeated the staff and the workshop. The tendency to really look inside and ask, yes, but what is it that I'm really feeling at this moment? And then to express that feeling. And that to me is a very great advantage of the workshop experience. I had a conversation with a man that impressed me a great deal. He had been very silent in the group. I had never heard him speak up. But it turned out that he had been for 28 years in the military service. He left as a high-ranking officer. His was a world of competition and power and achievement. Then his wife came to the Arcozelo workshop last year, and he began to get glimpses of some other world, of a different world than the world he had lived in. And it intrigued him, and he came here this year. He said that this had been the most significant and changing experience in his life. He'd begun to enter this new world where human values were uppermost, not competition and power, and where he began to rediscover himself. He rediscovered the child in himself, and that child could walk on the earth, but also could fly high in the skies. I was very impressed that here was a man who for years and years had lived a life of rigid constriction, and yet who in the workshop had enormously changed to realize some of the humanity within himself, some of the child within himself. And we asked him, why had he never spoken up in the meeting? Well, a lot was going on inside that was sufficient. And to me, that was another example of the kind of change that takes place in the workshop. I have a very clear memory of the three faces that I saw on one man. I saw him first in an evening meeting on sexuality and homosexuality. He was rigid, he was narrow, he was bigoted, he was authoritarian. The next morning in the community meeting, he began to open up as a person who was full of religious doubts. He didn't know what the base of his life was. He was really a searching person, trying to find some new truth around which he could build his life. It was just a totally different picture of it. And then the third face of his that I saw was the next morning in the community meeting, after he'd heard some others speak. He said with a good deal of force, "I realize I've been doing a lot of things that I don't like to do. I've been doing them just because of the expectations of others and the expectations I place on myself. And from here on, I'm going to do a lot more of what I want to do." And somehow, I just felt he'd gone through a tremendous change in the very short time that I had seen him. There was a 12-year-old boy at the workshop who interested me a great deal. He seemed perceptive, helpful, full of life, a very shrewd judge of human nature. So I was interested to hear the story of that boy. He had been a great problem to the workshop at the beginning of the workshop. Some people had thought he was homicidal, that he was dangerous, he was a delinquent. He had caused a good deal of trouble. And then some people from the workshop went to him and talked with him. They told him what was not acceptable, what people didn't like. They also asked him, "What do you need?" And he told them all the things he would like to get. He'd like to learn to paint. He'd like to learn to dance. He'd like to take part in the activities of the workshop. And so he was incorporated into the workshop. And from that time on, he became a real member of the workshop in every way. And to me, that was very significant, because here was someone who was outside of the workshop, and yet who, when dealt with the kind of attitudes which pervaded the workshop, when he was met with understanding and caring and treated as a person, he responded in a beautiful way and became a very positive member of the group and a very positive part of all that was going on. When I first came to the workshop, one woman was acting very strangely. She was wandering around the grounds all alone. When she spoke, she was not coherent. Then she was found all alone in front of the mirrors in the dance room without any clothing on. She was clearly crazy by any outside standards. But people respected her. They respected her aloneness. They treated her as a person. They even respected her desire to stand in front of the mirrors naked. And at the last meeting of the workshop, she was calm and possessed. At the last meeting of the workshop, she was calm and self-possessed, and she told of what this experience had meant to her. That she had re-examined her whole life. She named the people who had been of help to her. She said, and I could readily believe it, that she was leaving the workshop a much stronger, a much more integrated person than when she arrived. So that brings up the whole question of what is craziness? In my view, craziness often results when a very sensitive person finds a world in which there is no understanding. When no one understands, then one becomes more and more withdrawn. There is no chance of communication. You feel totally alienated, and so you become crazy. I've had an experience like that myself, and I know how much love and understanding can help. Love and understanding and a chance to be alone. How much those things can help in gradually returning to a more normal view of the world and to a better integrated kind of behavior. So to me, this was a very confirming experience to find that by respecting her as a person, this woman was able to go through a clearly psychotic episode, but come out of it stronger and better than when she entered.